recording, great. Okay, and I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, and we'll get over to this right here. Okay, there we go. Everyone can see my PowerPoint here, yes? All right, so here we are on week 2. Here's a little bit of housekeeping. Number 1, APA 7 is a must. Grammarly.com and reciteworks.com. Those are both great apps that we can use that are part of the Piedmont experience. Microsoft, by the way, if you guys are not using the version of Office provided to you, Office 365, through your student tuition, there's a lot of great stuff in Microsoft. You guys did know that, correct? You can nod if you do, yes? Okay, good. No? Really, really great. So, Shelby, if you go in to Microsoft Office 365 and use your credentials, your Lions, whatever, it should provide you with a version of Office that you can download.
That would have saved me so much trouble because this whole time when professors require the Word document, I go to my Google Docs and I download it as a Word document, but then the format messes up.
Mm-hmm.
So then I get points taken off for usually my references. So I submit the Word doc and the PDF to show that like my format was right. It just messed up on the Word document. Okay, well, I'm gonna try that later. Thank you.
Good, good. Um, and Microsoft has some great translation stuff. At some point, if we have a group that's interested over the summer, we can schedule this to where I can show you, you can do a PowerPoint using Microsoft Live and open Microsoft Translator with text to speech. And when you're doing that, you can have a parent teacher conference in any language with anyone, anywhere. So it's super helpful once you learn how to do it, because what happens is, I was in a community where almost everybody spoke Spanish, and my restaurant Spanish is okay. My conversational Spanish, not as much. So when I would set up conferences, what I would do is I would send them a link. They would open the link in Translator. Everything I said would appear on their screen in Spanish, and then they would do voice to text and it would translate it for them. And then they would speak back to me in Spanish and I would have it voice to text translate to English and they would read it to me. It's a very cool thing. Definitely, if you haven't done that yet, it's definitely worth learning how to do. And if you're interested, I'll set up a time this summer and we can practice with one outside of doing class. So today, though, we're talking about tort liability in education. Civil wrong resulting in a breach of duty. And these are the different things: negligence, intentional torts, defamation, or possible defenses. Defamation, I will tell you right now from the beginning, is just about impossible to prove. Okay, when somebody talks about a defamation of character because they said something bad or they slander you or whatever, it's all very, very subjective. Now, that's not to say people won't use it. That is one of the ones that is, well, it's very difficult to prove defamation. Negligence, that's a big one, and that's the reason that's number one, I believe, is because that's the most common one. I'll give you a couple of examples before we get further in here. And to me, these are common sense. I would bet to you they're common sense as well. But people do these things and don't think about it. Okay, I'll give you an example. You're in the middle of class. You really have to go to the bathroom. So you leave the class to go to the bathroom. Technically, if you really have to go, you get somebody to come into your classroom. And if it's anything, any of the classrooms that I've been in, that's a really hard ask to get somebody to come in and cover your class. And also, if someone's coming in and covering your class, who's covering their class? So that's where just one little piece of where negligence can come in. Okay. Let's say we're all out on the playground with our kids, and there's 4 classes out there, and all 4 of those teachers are all hanging out together. That's negligence. You don't think about it because, yeah, we're totally watching it. Well, you're watching 100 yards of field, but you're all have the same perspective. So are you really watching it? Not optimally, no. And that's where, again, that's where negligence comes in. Mandated reporting. If a child tells you something, you are legally responsible to handle it immediately. Not solve the problem, but to report it to your counselor. Now, if your counselor or social worker doesn't do anything with it, well, you've done your part. Should they do something? Of course they should. It's their responsibility, just like it was your responsibility to bring it to them. Typically, those kind of things are happening most often on a Friday at the very end of the school day. So what do? Do you let the kids go on the bus? You can, unless what's on the other end of the bus is a threat to the child. Yes, you do let the kid go on the bus. If there's a bigger concern and you need to keep them off, then you need to keep them off. Otherwise, that's where it falls under negligence. Okay. Intentional torts, battery, assault, intentional infliction of emotional distress, false imprisonment. Here's the crazy thing, guys. This stuff is here because it's happened before. And at a time, there were some of these things that happened that we did not necessarily view them the way that we view them now. Anyone here who's over the age of 40 might have a memory of a school somewhere, whether it be your school or somebody's school, that allowed paddling. Did you know in the state of Georgia, paddling is not illegal? That's still on the law books. You could paddle if you felt it were appropriate, unless your school district said no. Now, I'll tell you, most of the big metro, actually all of the metro area school districts, and I would say when I say all of, I'd say pretty much every school district that has more than 4 high schools in it, that's big enough that they've probably decided, no, we're not letting that happen. But that falls under battery, right? We can call it discipline, but it's also battery. False imprisonment, that's a wild one. So when I started teaching, I taught in Fulton County, and one of our schools got, a big makeover and all that stuff, and they built a whole new school. But the old school had been there since the early 1900s. And they had a room, I'm not kidding, in this school that was padded with a cell in it. Yeah. Now, what happened in there? Nobody was brave enough to give me the words as to what happened in there. And this will actually go into some of the other issues of tort liability. If you put something into words, you are now responsible for those words. Okay. For example, if you have a student that you feel might need some additional assistance, maybe this student needs to be tested to see if they're on the spectrum, to see if they have ADHD, to see any number of things, to see if they're dyslexic. If you as the teacher make that suggestion that a student be tested, guess who is responsible for that student's testing? You, the teacher. If we make those suggestions with those words, now that's not to say that they shouldn't be done, but tort liability tells us that if I say, hey, I really think that, I'm concerned about Johnny and I think Johnny might have ADHD, you may want to get him tested. Boom, guess what? You just bought yourself a test for ADHD for Johnny. Now, what we would say instead is, I would recommend talking to your pediatrician about their thoughts. I'm seeing some behaviors that are different out of him, and that's not my area of expertise, but your pediatrician should be able to help you with this. That's the closest we can come. Another one, beginning of the school year is when it happens the most. You get IEPs, right? Depending on how many students you teach, you may get dozens of IEPs, right? Music teachers, art teachers, we get the whole school's worth of IEPs. So you might get over 100, right? And legally, what part of what we need to do is you need to read it and sign off on it that you are willing to execute that IEP, that you are aware of the child's needs and that you are going to adjust your teaching to meet those needs. Now, that in itself is the first piece. Here's the piece that they don't talk about enough that we really need to be more cognizant of. When you got all of those IEPs to sign off on, how were they delivered to you? Were they put in your mailbox? Were they
Mine are always brought in a folder to my classroom by the teacher.
handed to you in
But
class?
yeah, but then they always ask me to sign off on it right then. And I'm like, I haven't even had a chance to read over it. Or instead of providing me like the full IEP, they only give me that last back page with the accommodations. And I'm going, okay, so I see their accommodations, but I don't understand why they need them. And that led to probably some tort liability issues in which a student had a complete meltdown, started destroying the classroom. I mean, like, was about to injure some others. And it was all because in the IEP, had they provided me the whole thing, it gave me some of the list of his triggers. And it also gave me, if he's in that state, ask him about cats and he calms down instantly. I didn't know that because they only gave me the back page.
Mm-hmm.
Shelby, do they give you like snapshots? Because that's what our district does. And all the IEPs are in SLDS on Infinite Campus, but they only give us snapshots. So they give us that little bit of information too.
I don't have, so the closest thing that I have is like a little flag that says IEP or 504. But because I'm not the IEP or 504 coordinator, they don't allow me access to anything where I could go like look up the kid's IEP. And I've asked about it before. I was like, in my old district, I was able to look up my students, but in this one that I actually am leaving it now, but the one that I've been with the last 5 years, I haven't been able to get access.
Mm-hmm.
You ask to have them make sure you could have it. Oh, I know I didn't used to be able to have access either because we would get the same thing that Amanda said she got was, or I think you said it, that I would get the accommodations, but I wouldn't have the full thing, but I can access it on Infinite Campus, like Amanda said. But I know at one point I wasn't able to in previous years, but I thought they made the adjustment where if you're if you're the student's teacher, I don't see why you shouldn't be able to have access to the full document.
And I wonder if that's, so we have Power School instead of Infinite Campus. And I know Power School has a lot of limitations that Infinite Campus in my old district didn't. So I wonder if maybe that's a part of it. But still, you'd think that, you know, if you go to the case manager and you say, hey, can I have a copy of the full IEP? You would think that they would go, yeah, here's a copy of the full IEP that you asked for, not, you know, be upset with me going, well, I don't want to have to go back and print all these, you know, like that's too much or whatever. I just want to know what my kids are in for, you know?
Yep. The reason I was asking about how those IEPs are delivered, and it sounds like from what most of you are saying here, they're actually being done correctly, which is wonderful. For a very long time, that stack of IEPs would be put in a teacher's mailbox, and they would say, please sign off on these and return them. That's very illegal. Very, very, very illegal. Because that affects the confidentiality of the document and the interest of the student. You can't do that. And one of the issues that Infinite Campus has come up with is who has access to this data, and you know, what are they able to do with it? How much of that data can we show them? You know, because, you know, as you said, if there's a flag, as the teacher, I have a responsibility to meet whatever those needs are from that flag. If the kid's a McKinney-Vento kid, I need to be able to know that, because, you know, that might change some of the things in the way that I handle a situation. Anyway, so in a litigious society, that's a fancy man word for law, anyone can initiate a legal action against an educator at will. That is freaking nuts, but it's the truth. Any given moment, somebody could get a wild hair and they could sue the school. They could try to go after you personally. And the best things that you can do are your job. That's it. Just make sure you're doing your job. If you're doing your job, you're fine. Organizations such as PAGE or GAE, those are good organizations. The state of Georgia is a right-to-work state, which means that a union will do nothing for you except help you with legal counsel if you need it and provide a network for you. It's not going to keep your job. And if you're not a member of PAGE or GAE, I highly recommend it just to make sure that you're covered. It's not crazy expensive, and if nothing else, it's another professional organization that has your best interest. Let's see. Okay, so now we're ready to jump into the discussion. Okay, so some steps that should be followed when a student is hurt at school, either on the playground or during a science class. What steps could have happened beforehand to prevent the accident? We'll discuss in small groups, and then as a whole group, we'll use these situations you may be familiar with and think through the way things are handled. So all of us have had some type of experience where a kid got hurt. So leading in, before we, and we'll break it into groups and we'll converse that way. Let's come up with our generic on this. So a kid got hurt on the monkey bars. Okay. Ripped his hands all up, which happens every time a school puts in monkey bars. Okay. It doesn't matter how old the kid is. Okay. So our elementary kid got on the monkey bars, tore his hands up. Now, we are going to decide what we would do as the teacher, the administrator, and the school nurse. Okay. So I'm going to break us into groups. Let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right. Let me get us into breakout rooms here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen if you don't mind, and I'll get us into these groups real quick. 2 breakout rooms. I'll have them assign automatically. Okay. So all you're going to do is I'm going to give you 5 minutes. You're going to decide how you're going to handle the situation, what would have or should have happened before, and what you're going to do after. Okay. Kid's on the monkey bars, tore his hands up. He's hurt. You know, it's going to be a he. It's always a he. The girl's smart enough to do differently. The boy's not. Sorry, I'm one of us. I did it. Anyway, so I'm going to open the rooms. We're at 5 minutes. I'll give you the 5-minute warning, and I'm going to jump back and forth between the 2 conversations. And here we go.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Yes, but what's the before? I understand the after, like when he injures himself, but what's the
I think
before?
about like what you would review with the kids beforehand, like reviewing the rules about, no running or no climbing on the outside of the slide, which seems to be the thing that happens in our school. But with monkey bars, it's hard those blisters just happen. So,
Well, I guess like one person at a time too, so you're not hanging there forever. So you have to
yeah,
wait for.
just going over the rules with the kids would be the biggest. And then as you're doing.
Oh,
Yeah, there we go.
there we go. And that would be fairly expensive, but then
Yeah.
also, how are you going to keep, let's say, like kindergarten to elementary age kids from putting it in their mouth then? Because now
Right.
they're eating the chalk.
Right. Yep. Well, I grew up in South Florida. I mean, the monkey bars were like 1,000 degrees. So
Yeah.
Right,
that's
hot.
just
Yeah.
what happened.
Yeah.
Well, I
Anything
think
metal.
if you have like some kind of handbook or safety procedures or things posted in your classroom, I think you could reference that is part of your like daily language or rules and procedures that you could say that we have gone over safety procedures if you have like a handbook or like a chart. But
And that may be good
I
too
mean,
if you have grown-ups. So like at my school, we have the code of conduct that the student and the grown-ups have to sign saying that they understand. So
Right.
maybe making sure that there's something about that that's
Yeah.
signed and returned by the grown-up before the kids are playing on the playground.
also,
Yeah, that
also
was
make I would just make sure also that you are going out at approved times. I know a
Right.
lot of times when teachers have downtime, they say, "Oh, let's go to the monkey bars or whatever."
small, jumped, she missed it and fell. And, you think about that was probably not meant for her age group.
Yeah, so as an
This was a
admin,
public
like
one.
you have to make sure that the equipment is age appropriate and also safe. So that's something that needs to be done ahead of time as an admin, is just making sure that the equipment is safe, well maintained. And
Yeah, because some of that plastic, when it gets cracks in it, it can pinch on a kid's skin, and that's. And I remember like we had these like asphalt or cement little tunnels, things that were used in piping, and they painted it and made it into a toy for us. And then we had a wooden A-frame. And in the 80s and 90s, we were about that life, but they tore down the A-frame.
That equipment.
They tore down that A-frame at Stockbridge Elementary. I was in high school and they tore down this big A-frame. I mean, like that was one of our, it was huge, and they tore it down, and it was even in the paper.
Yeah,
We
those playground
all
death
talked
traps don't
about
exist
it.
anymore.
Yeah, but like I'm certain there were kids that may have gotten hurt, and that was probably why. And it was wood, so it'd probably been through all the weathering and stuff. But I think I'm someone that I'm a professional worrier, so I think about all the ways something could go wrong, and then that's how I plan. And it's very type A. And when we were doing our spring trip this year, I really got on Matt Rubenstein's nerves about it, but we didn't have a single issue on our trip. I planned for everything. I planned for everything. So
And would you say that active monitoring could kind of help prevent those situations from occurring?
yeah, because teachers be on their phones.
I think too, so when Yuri said something about what admin needs to do beforehand, I know a lot of schools don't have nurses on hand consistently, that they're sharing one nurse that's going through a cluster. So I guess as far as the nurse goes, maybe like knowing what specific days they're going to be on the playground. I don't know if they don't do elementary. I don't know if they like pre-schedule outings. Now I know, like I said, back in the day, it was like, okay, y'all are being good. We're gonna have, we're gonna go outside and play.
That's what we did.
Yeah, so I don't know now in elementary if it's scheduled, and if it is, then the nurse needs to kind of know who's out there, especially if you're talking about maybe like if you have like your certain groups of kids, like your children with disabilities, like that's when you're really going to be on high alert if they are having their playground time. So just kind of being aware of what the playground times are for specific age groups or for a specific group.
Responsible for like all of that. So I was out
Wow.
there monitoring as my portion of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That
then, of
and
course,
field trips. Those scare me.
yes. And then like as the nurse, because I know we've only got 1 minute left, as the nurse, I make sure that I have my district form filled out of like, okay, why are they in the nurse? What's going on? Make
Right.
sure I get the incident report, make sure you contact the grown-ups, you do any immediate first aid and help to evaluate whether or not the student needs to go to the emergency room or whether they need to follow up with just their primary care.
Right.
Oh, hey, you all are here. Good to see you. Okay, so I heard some very nice conversation. Let's start with the before. Okay. So as a teacher, what are some of the things that our group decided would be the before going out to the monkey bars? Shelby.
So we talked, I guess this all kind of actually encompasses admin and teacher. We talked about how like Christina's school has a playground safety video that the students have to watch before they go out. But then also as a teacher, making sure that you're reinforcing those rules and guidelines before you go out there in terms of expected behavior. Tammy brought up a good point about making sure they understand, okay, you know, X amount of students can be over here at a time, X amount over here at a time. That way they're taking turns and it's not overcrowding. And then making sure, Matt mentioned making sure that you're going out during your designated times so that there aren't too many classes out there, or, you know, someone can't go, well, you weren't even supposed to be out there anyway. Why were you out there? So, yeah.
Okay, good. Anyone else have some before to add?
We said that it would be really important that the playground equipment was appropriate for that grade level.
Yes.
And I just use the example in my school, my elementary school, there was a playground area for kindergarten through second, and then there was one for third through fourth. And the size of the equipment was different. And it was some of it was made from different materials, but it was very clear that this is the grade level that goes on this side and this side.
Mhm. Nice. And I mean, a lot to that as far as, you know, even what the shade is there, because, you know, some of the stuff can get rather hot, especially if it is more, you know, in the 70s and 80s, everything was metal. Does anybody remember a swing set that one leg came out of the ground when you went back far enough? Yeah, man. Uh, yeah, you can't have that anymore.
Maybe that's where the love of roller coasters came from. The thrill of, are you going to get hurt?
Could be. We had these gigantic tractor tires that were buried in the ground just part of the way to climb over. And I figured when I was in elementary school that my body fit inside of one of the tractor tires. And so I won hide and seek. Maybe I was so annoying they didn't want to try to find me, but I felt at the time I was really good at hide and seek because I won every day. And it's amazing that no one found my spot. I think they knew where my spot was now, like as an adult reflecting. And I can't say I blame them. But all right, so we've got the before. Another group that was left out of this that I think is critical, especially if you're going to be, you know, any of those things, is you need to get the parents to know what's going on. Right? And no,
That's right. We mentioned that too. We were talking about like in the school handbook where it has kind of like the rules and procedures, and my school requires that the grown-ups sign that saying that they've read it and they understand it, and making sure that there's something in there about the playground safety.
right. Now, one thing that I see a lot in school, and I want to tell you the what, and then I want to tell you the why. When people are making videos about the rules and what to do, for some reason, a lot of teachers think it's cute to show the wrong thing and have the kids, you know, see what the wrong thing is and then see what the right thing is. Am I alone in this, or have you seen this done? Okay, I'm going to tell you why that is wrong. Okay, it's a psychological thing. When we are given the option of right or wrong, our brain always leans naturally toward the positive. That's just the way we are. So, for example, if you say, don't think about pizza, my brain goes, all I heard was think about pizza. And guess what I'm doing? Thinking about pizza. Why are you saying other words? Because I got pizza up here, right? So when we say, well, don't do it this way, all your brain is hearing is do it this way. And then it takes another step for you to say, oh, that thing, right? No. The first thing I hear, my brain leans towards the positive. That's the thing I'm supposed to do. Got it. Got it. So having, you know, parents aware of what the rules are on the playground, great. Having kids aware, and it doesn't, I'm telling you, it does not need to be cute. It just needs to be the rules. You know, if you want to write it in a clever font or something like that, if you want to have a stuffed animal tell them what they need to know, great. doesn't matter. Needs to be the rules. They need to be worded in a way of what I can do, not what I can't. Because as soon as you lead with what not to do, you've lost them. Right? And we talked about this. I know a lot of you guys, we talked about this last year when we were talking about making class rules and what class rules were supposed to look like. And it's tell me the stuff that I can do. I can't know what your expectations are if your expectations are the stuff that I can't do. That's not an expectation, right? I need to know what you want me to do, not what you don't want me to do. So anyway, that's going back. So now, while we are out on the playground, what is our job? How are we making sure that we are best suiting these children or the needs of these children to keep them safe? Brittany, what do you got?
The biggest thing that we said is that we have to make sure that we're actively monitoring. Making sure I probably most of us now, if we're outside, we're going to take our cell phones out. Obviously, I don't do playground, but even whenever I take my high schoolers out, if we're doing an activity outside, let's just say I'm having them learn how to write about descriptive writing, and we go outside to practice that where they're using like sensory language. If I'm outside, like I take my cell phone, so I have a communication device, but not being distracted by it. So consistently actively monitoring while we are outside.
Okay, good. Does anybody else have something for that? Okay. Now the last piece is after the fact. So you're on the playground, kid gets hurt or cuts up their hands or gets a hangnail for whatever the thing might be. What's our responsibility next?
So I was telling my group about how our emergency response team, or ERT team, we make sure that all the teachers have their phone numbers. All of ERT has a walkie, so I had a walkie this year. So if something happens, the first thing that I do is I immediately call ERT. So then I have several members who are getting ready to run out and assist me. Then I have more eyes on kids. I have someone to help me with the injured student. I have someone to help me collect any incident reports or statements, anything like that. So calling them, and then, you know, you're going, okay, let me make sure that this kid gets to the nurse. They need to be seen by the nurse, even if it's something simple, because you don't want a parent coming to you going, well, they got a paper cut and now they've got an infection, you know, because those things can get nasty pretty fast. Huh?
And it's septic, and the kids
right. And so, you know, I always make sure my students understand in my classroom, if you get hurt, I'm not mad at you. Now, if we're running around like crazy people, I'm irritated, but I'm not mad at you for getting hurt. I'm mad if you don't tell me, because if you get hurt, I need to help you. We need to address it. We need to figure out what went wrong and how to prevent that. Yeah.
Something I just thought about. If you haven't fulfilled your done the beginning of the year safety video sign-offs, that would be a nightmare. Like that's a lawsuit, I guess. Potentially, like you weren't trained in like the bloodborne pathogens, or if you were dealing with like anything like that. So that goes to the before. So
good. And the stop the bleed, that was a newer one. That's helpful. All right, Brittany, I see you got your hand up.
Well, I was just going to say, whenever she said that they had like an emergency response team, I guess on the part of administration, I know we're talking about the after, but really the most really important part for administration before is to ensure that staff knows what their process is in an emergency situation should a student get injured. Like, what's the consistent steps that you take?
Right. Good. Yes. And that would be what Matthew said. That would be going on with those early trainings that we do. I'm sorry, I jumped over somebody. Go ahead.
No, I was just thinking we have, I mean, I think everybody has it called something different. We have what's called a first response team. And it has to be at least one of the PE teachers, if not both, and then somebody on each hallway, each grade level have to be part of that team. And we're all trained in CPR and the AED stuff. That's for like major injuries, obviously, but yeah, the teachers are expected to take a walkie out and to the playground at all times, and they have their phones on them, and they're expected to be spread out around. We've even gotten emails from our principal reminding the teachers that they need to do that, which means sometimes she must see them not doing that. But yeah, I was thinking about ours is called a first response team, and they're trained in all of those different devices.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, two of the most dangerous places in a school, playground and cafeteria. And you know, it's very easy for teachers who really have very limited adult social interaction to you know, to make sure that they can maintain that, you know, because here I am for the first time in my whole day, I'm out on the playground. Hey, there's grown-ups. I might be able to talk about dumb stuff that my spouse did or that my children are doing or whatever, and actually have some intellectual-ish conversation. But we really shouldn't do that. And that's hard. You know, cafeteria as well. Frank.
So I wanted to kind of share for the good of the group. I know in my school for sure we try to eliminate prevent that from happening as far as taking them outside. And one of my APs always says and preaches all the time, says, hey, protect your assets, meaning that after you have made sure that the child is being taken care of, make sure you get the story right, because that is your job, not before he gets to the school. By the process of elimination, it is you first. Is that would
Oh,
you
yeah.
agree with that?
Absolutely. And that brings a couple things. Anytime there's any type of incident, regardless, you know, if it's on the playground, if it's whatever, that parent is going to be contacted. If you want the safest, smartest thing you can do is contact the parent and say, hey, this is because otherwise, if you don't, when that child goes home, if the child's not getting an appropriate amount of attention or whatever, that child's got a great reason to start crying their eyes out, whether they mean to or not. Talk about you and what you didn't do. And guess what? We are now in the generation of what did you do? When I started teaching, if I called a parent, it was what did he do? And you could hear the parent grabbing the child to send right next to him to hear what it was that you had to say. It has changed 10, 15 years. It is now, what did you do? I know my child didn't do anything because they said that. They didn't do anything. So I've got to believe that, right? Because it's my child. Mm-mm.
We had a teacher who was breaking up a fight this school year, and the kid who started the fight got mad that the teacher put his hands on him to break up the fight. And he was like, you put your hands on me. And I'm going, the irony here of this child starting the fight, but then saying this. So that's where those witness statements really come into play. Also, if you're one of the teachers involved in breaking up a fight, you're not supposed to contact the teachers directly at our school. You have to allow the admin to do that so that it prevents you from getting into some sort of verbal altercation with the grown-ups. And then the nurse is the one that's required if the student's injured. She's required to call the grown-ups and inform them and recommend whether they need to go to the emergency room or follow up with the doctor.
Okay. Still, and I see that as a good protocol to have in place. The minute as a teacher I let somebody else make a phone call for me, I'm giving up any power I had as a teacher. Yeah, if you're okay with that, great. I have never been okay with that. And I will tell you some of the things that I've done through teaching elementary, middle, and high school. Anytime, and this is my belief. I'm not saying that you should do this. Do I think you should? I think you should, but it doesn't matter, right? I know that I do. And that is, anytime I'm going to take a student out of class to have any kind of conversation, I'm calling the parent. Doesn't matter what the conversation is. If I'm pulling you out of class to talk to you about being in honors chorus in a month, I'm calling your parent that night to let them know because I took you out of class. And I feel that as a responsibility. Another thing, anytime there's something, that a child is doing as far as behavior that I'm concerned about, I want the parent to know because I'm a parent and I want to know. Because my children are not perfect. And I greatly appreciated any and all, and there were plenty of phone calls from teachers telling me about my children. And I was always the what did he do parent, because that's how I was raised as well. But again, anytime you're going to pull a kid out, I feel like you need to call. And another thing that I've always done, anytime I have to make a negative phone call, I write down the date. And I make sure within the next 2 weeks that I have something positive to call that parent and say. Even if it's, Johnny had his instrument every day this past 2 weeks and he was ready to go. Awesome. Now, Johnny was also throwing chairs. Johnny was also this, that, the other thing. He didn't have a reed, but he did have his clarinet with him every day and he did have it out. Awesome. So I need to do that, even if it is not the full extent of how great I think Johnny is. I need to do that because I need to know the next time I call, if there's a next time to say, you need to help Johnny and me fix this, I've got the parent on my side. Because I'm not always calling, telling them things that their child's doing wrong. I'm telling them sometimes stuff their kid does well. And I'll tell you, it's not that hard to find. It really isn't. There are some kids that definitely test us, but they're not like that for everybody. We just need to find the person that they're not like that for and ask them. Maybe you can lean in on that. All right. So anyway, those are just a couple of practices as far as conversation with parents. And again, you will get so much more done if the parents are backing you up. And the parents will back you up if you can be real with them. And if they can believe that, yes, you do have their child's best interest. And some of them will say, like, I can't believe that you blah, blah, blah to Dr. Krosner. You can't do that to that man. That man adores you. That guy would do anything for you. You know that. Why would you be that way for him? Right? Now that takes time. You work at that to get there. That's reputation. And that's our reputation as educators and how important that is to get ourselves to those. And yes, Julie, when you know the parents and you know who you're dealing with, and sometimes there are parents who are like, God, I really wish I didn't have to talk to this one, but we do. Okay, so here's our scenario to solve. Here are some points to consider. Okay, Susan's a second grade teacher with 10 years of experience. She's on recess duty. She observed several third grade boys playing hide and go seek. She expected their teacher to return shortly, but the teacher didn't. She was distracted by a commotion in the parking lot. She didn't address the group, correct their position, and so she went to go speak to the pastor. I don't understand all that. Anyway, kid got hurt. Is Susan liable? What do you think?
I think, okay, so first, I was trying to read the scenario along with you, and I think I missed a couple key points here. Okay, so Susan and another teacher are outside with their classes. One teacher leaves to go to the bathroom or whatever. Susan's out there, and then she gets distracted, and then a kid gets hurt, right?
Right.
Okay, they're both responsible then, because the one shouldn't have left her class to begin with. And second, if you're the only adult with that class, you cannot get distracted. There's no excuse with that. That's actually an argument that I had with another teacher this year. She was not monitoring her portion of the hallway and students were starting to fight. So I got on to them. She then got mad at me for correcting her students. So we had to sit down with admin. So sorry, we had to sit down with admin. And I was like, I'm not going to leave students unattended in the hallway fighting. I'm not doing that. If there's no other adult, I am now in charge of them as the closest adult.
Well, absolutely. It is a see something, say something. If you saw it, it is your job and responsibility to do something, whether you know the kids or not. You know, Susan's a second grade teacher. She saw third graders. Chances are, if they're third graders and she teaches second grade, she remembers them from last year, but that doesn't even matter. If she's never met these kids and she sees them doing something that she is questioning, her job is to take care of that.
Mm-hmm.
Period. And that's one of those things that's not a discussion. That is just simply your job. Nice. Okay. Sorry, just look.
Are we still typing this up and submitting it as our module 2 scenario?
We
Or
are not.
okay, so we'll just say something that says we're in class for that one.
Completed in class.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Louis. Sorry, it's raining and my dog's running on the porch. All right. Okay.
Rosner, he has the cone of shame on.
Both of them do.
Bless it.
Both of them do. Yes. It's hilarious. So he got it first. He's the one that loves to be on camera. He got it first. I think they got a sand flea bite and it turned into a hot spot. And anyway, his is on his right hip, hers is on her left hip. And they're both pretty pathetic. You'll see her walk around here in a second with her cone of shame on. She might be hiding out because she doesn't want you to see her, but yeah, they're funny. They're funny. Anyway, all right, so let's get back into this. So yes, the question was for the scenario, what do we put? You will submit to me discussed in class. And every one of you is a part of that discussion. Hey, guess what? Happy Memorial Day. It's a Memorial Day miracle. Yes. And this is being recorded, and I will be posting this recording shortly. Let's see here. Let me go back into my PowerPoint if you don't mind. I'm going to share this screen again. Okay, there's this. Okay. All right. Okay, First Amendment key items, embellishment clause, typically used to challenge governmental advancement of religion. Okay, free exercise clause, usually challenge secular government regulations which impair the practice of religious beliefs. Okay, this is going into religion in school. And I will tell you, does not matter what the law says, as long as there are tests in school, there will be prayer in school. Now, whether they do it out loud or not, that's up to the students. Is it appropriate for the teachers to lead the prayer? I don't believe so, but that's my opinion. Now,
Did you see what Texas is doing?
Texas is always doing weird stuff.
Yeah, because it just got passed in the Texas House and it's getting sent back to the Texas Senate but it looks like it's going to pass where every classroom, every public school classroom is required to display the 10 Commandments.
Really? Well, there you go. Lucky. I'm sorry. 1 second. She's a trouble.
But it might be historical, but without context,
Right.
there's no historical value to it. So it's just a display of Christianity, which then puts Christianity at the forefront and
Oh, I'm a
everything
Jew.
else to the
Use the
side.
10 Commandments.
Huh?
Those are in my book too. The 10
Well,
Commandments.
they may not be in everyone. I don't know
That's true.
everybody's religion, but I mean, like, without context, I think that's a hard one to really justify.
I looked up that I was aware of that law because another friend had told me about it. Because there was another state trying to make sure that the Bible was available in all school libraries because it's a historical text. And that's the argument that they're coming from is that, well, they are historical texts, they are documented and recorded in history. And so that was the rationale that they came about it with lawmakers in case people wanted to challenge it. And a lot of times, depending on what your belief system is, you have to be able to provide the context in that academic setting. And so that's
I think the irony of that. Yeah, and the irony of that, though, is if someone were to come back and say, okay, well, I want the Quran available in the library, there would be a lot of pushback from that.
Yeah, and they put the Quran in the Valdosta State University Library. Nice. And okay. There was a group of literature majors that thought it was important that we had all these different books. They didn't want Mein Kampf. They didn't want that one, really? but
it's a historical text.
It is. I guess they didn't, but no, the Quran got put in there and it was put into some religious literature classes for literature majors and master's students. And that was also the argument that they came from at it. And there were other schools around the country that added that to their library because it was historical text.
It's also the point with in choral groups is how we can sing sacred songs in a secular school because they're written by historical people. They're considered a historical document. Those sacred texts. That's how that's in the GMEA handbook, I believe.
Yeah. So just trying to be I think that was their rationale, so they could be very bipartisan about it, which I really respect. Because no matter what you view, you gotta try to look at it from both sides of the aisle.
Right. So one of the interesting things with that we hear about religion and school is the separation of church and state. And I may be preaching to the choir here, but you know that there is not a single legal document that mentions separation of church and state. That was from letters from Thomas Jefferson about his opinions. Now, does religion have a place in a classroom? Partly, entirely, no.
I would say yes, but I would go with partly because I'm a literature teacher and I'm helping write the new curriculum for the state because we just got new ELA standards for the state of Georgia. So I'm helping to write them. And what came to mind, because I have Bible stories in there, but it's because we also use like Japanese religious stories, but only for the narrative component of it and to talk about like themes and to compare different texts and things like that. So, but that's the only reason why I would see that religion needs to be included, because it is a type of literature. Now, the historical context is something that could be argued because some people might believe that, okay, this isn't actual, historic things to happen, that these are just stories that were made up. Historically, they were written just like the Odyssey and things like that, or they weren't written because the Odyssey wasn't written, it was more so spoken, but still they have a place in literature. But the argument that they're historical, the only thing that you could really argue that makes them completely historical is the fact that they were either written or they were spoken, and there's some type of thing that shows that it was done in the past.
Yes. Excellent. And you know, when you talk about Bible, the Bible's been translated so many times. I mean, is it a great book? Of course it is. It's a bestseller. It is. I mean, but all of those books are great books. Right? The fact and coming from the family of Holocaust survivors, the fact that Mein Kampf is not in libraries is actually tragic to me. I've read parts of it. It's frightening. But you know what? It's the kind of thing that I believe as a historical document. It's literally, he said exactly what he was going to do from prison. And then he did. And people were surprised. You know, I mean, that's kind of stuff I think we need to be reading. Otherwise, you're going to repeat it.
See, and that's like when a kid makes a comment at school and then they go, "Oh, I was just joking."
Mm-hmm.
And I go and I report it, and I know that guidance sometimes gets tired of that, where they're like, the kid says they're joking, the kid says this, the kid says that. I'm like, okay, but people say what they're thinking and what they're going to do. And while they might be joking in one moment, if it's repetitive, we've got a pattern here and we need to be concerned.
Yeah. Well, one thing that my wife and I say all the time is when somebody tells you who they are, you need to believe them. When somebody shows you who they are, you need to believe them. And you know, I was just kidding. That's such a lame excuse, man. Because think about it this way, with any of these things, by the way, if this thing were to happen across the street from your school, are the consequences different than if it happened at your school? I'll give you an example. Let's say I got really, really angry at one of my friends and punched him in the face. Okay. If I did that at school and I'm a student and I did that at school, I might get, and probably will, if not, I should get suspended, right? If I did that across the street from the school, that's assault and battery and is a felony. A felony, not a misdemeanor, a felony, punishable by jail. And there's a lot of things that, you know, that we handle in school because it's supposed to be a place of learning, right? But just kidding, if a kid writes a manifesto of how they're going to go in and blow up the school, right? And we take that child into custody and they say, I was just kidding. What do we do?
So Dr. Krosner, 2 weeks after Appalachia, there was a horn player kid. I wouldn't say he's a horn player. He holds the French horn, but he
Horn
told a
owner?
kid, he told the kid that he was going to go find where he lives and go blow up his house with him and everybody he loved in it. And he got suspended for 10 days pending a hearing. Allegedly, the kid was bullying him and picking on him, which they could later prove that that was happening. He was getting picked on and bullied. There were some students and that said something. Even the teacher had reported it once, but they still suspended him for 10 days because it was 2 weeks after Appalachia, and that school's 20 minutes from our school. And as a result, he failed 8th grade night, which was a major test grade, and he was going to fail my class. And when I told his mom, she said I was not accommodating him per his IEP. And even though I did all my due diligence and CYA, the admin said, can you just do this as a favor versus give him an alternative assignment, which I did, and he refused, and I had to give him a third one because he was so cognitively low. There was nothing that he could he could do, but he said it 2 weeks after Appalachia, and that intensified everything. And I think, and it's not even happened. It's not even been a full year, but Jackson County and Clark County have taken it beyond serious when it comes to allegations. And the like our superintendent even said, like the not kidding thing. I can't tell you how many, like Shelby, you've probably heard that a bunch, haven't you? I can't tell you how many times I've heard,
Oh yeah.
I was just kidding. I was just messing around. And our superintendent made a press statement that said, if your child says they're just kidding, we don't care. And I was like, whoa.
See, and what happened at my school was, and this anger is not quite the right word for it. I was beyond livid at my admin for this one. So every time a student has ever said anything like that, we've always sent them home pending a mental evaluation. They cannot come back until they are mentally evaluated, make sure that they are safe, they're not a threat to themselves or to others. I had a kid, I know we're recording right now, but I'm just going to say it. Her mom's a bitch. I mean, she is awful. And
this
that
child does not
kid,
have a name, right?
right? No, this child does not have a name, nameless.
Good.
But this kid shows up to class one day and says, loud enough for half the class to hear, some days I wake up and look at myself in the mirror and just wish I could come shoot up the school. So I immediately call admin to come pull this student out of class. And this child sits in the office for the day and gets returned to class the next day because admin doesn't want to deal with the grown-up. And I'm going, every other
That
kid
child
has to
have
go
an
get a mental health
IEP?
evaluation. Oh, she does.
The
But
one
that
thing that
doesn't necessarily mean that it was a part of that.
Right. So the one thing, and I learned this very quickly, the one thing about the students who have like an IEP, and the biggest thing that kind of scares me is that sometimes they have a BIP too. And
She
even
did
with the
not have a bit.
IEP, well, even with the IEP though, there's always like I think parents have become so not so much knowledgeable, but they have like this umbrella knowledge where they're like, okay, as long as I say this, and the main phrase is it's a manifestation of their disability. And that's where they can get like they can get away with so many things if they start to talk about how it's a manifestation of their disability. I had an 8th grader who was selling his dad's prescription meds in the school. And I'm like, he not only is it wrong for him to be doing that, right? But it's dangerous for those kids who are buying them. Like when a kid overdoses in the school, you know what I'm saying? And this kid got off for it being a manifestation of his disability. And he came right back. He was out for like 5 days. And it blew my mind because I'm just thinking, okay, when one of these kids overdoses, then it's going to be one of those stories in the news where they say, hey, well, just 2 weeks ago, he, got caught selling these prescription drugs in the bathroom, and they didn't kick him out. Like it's the same old thing over and over again. So that's the one
And I
thing when
think
they have
that's
the
why I
IP.
had trouble with phone calls. Because the phone call, you can't document exactly what you said. Like you can take notes
Yes, you
afterwards
can.
and send a follow-up email. But that's one of the reasons
I
why
always send a
phone calls are
follow-up
my least
email.
favorite. Yeah, I prefer the email because then I can do the read receipt. I can see that they've read it, if they responded to it. And I don't know, phone calls,
And
I
it's
like
tough
to have someone
because
else present with me too.
sometimes
As
what you're trying to, sometimes like tone is very different in an email than it is when you verbalize it.
yes,
So I'm a phone call type of person. Like I like to call a parent. Especially like I'm pretty genuine with, I don't want any kid to get in trouble, but so I like to call so they can hear, hey, this is my tone. I'm not trying to fuss. I want your child to be great, et cetera, et cetera. But I think we are going to get to the point where we may have to, like transcribe the phone call, you know what I'm saying? Like where you record it and transcribe it. Like I get on the phone and I say, hey, I just want to let you know this call is being recorded for your safety and for mine, just so
for
both of us
quality
are
and
like,
assurance purposes.
yes, it's awful. It's like the little 5-minute phone call that you plan on having turns into a super long one. But yeah, like I feel like at some point in time, you're going to have to transcribe them. But I do always send like a follow-up email after I make a phone call to say, hey, this is just a quick summary of what we discussed on the phone. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, just email me back. And then that way I can go into the call log or the communication log and say, here's the phone call, here's the email I sent afterwards, so they know. But yeah, it's scary.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. What I would like to do at this point is I want to kind of wrap us up and bring us back into center here. So we've talked about the stuff that we should do and the stuff that we can and can't do. And we really try to focus on the stuff we can do, right? I want to give you a couple of quick, just super fast things that you may or may not have realized. And I want you to think about it because these do fit in with what we're talking about today. And these are things that teachers do all the time and do not think about. Okay, are you ready? Number one, if you pay your bills on your work computer, all of your account information is public record. So if anything that happens during the school day or on the school network or on your school computer, which belongs to the taxpayers of your school district, anything that is done there is the property of the school district and could be part of an open records request, which means quite simply, I would never recommend to pay bills. That is correct. Well, this is my own personal computer that I'm using here, but yes, this is Piedmont's Zoom that we're doing. We're on Piedmont's Canvas. So anything that we were to come up with in here can't be necessarily originally mine. It belongs to Piedmont. But yes, if we're in here right now and we are, any of the stuff that we do is available to an open records request. And that's a huge one that people don't think about and do all the time. Communication. When you communicate with parents, if you need to call a parent, always do it from school. Don't do it from your personal phone, because when you do it from your personal phone becomes part of the school because you're doing your job with that. So it becomes a tool for your school. Now you can write it off, but guess what? It doesn't belong to you if somebody wants to argue that point. As soon as you start doing your job with your personal things, those personal things become part of your job. And again, if somebody wants to fight that, they can. I choose not to. When we
So then in theory,
okay,
if my principal tries to call me after hours on my phone, I don't have to pick up because that would be a work call and I don't want my work call. Okay.
So when I was an instructional technology specialist for the school district, they wanted us to have a county issued phone. And my response was, do I have to? And they said, no, you don't have to. You can use your own. I said, well, here's my question. If you call me, do I have to answer? Because if I have to answer, I might as well use your phone. If I can do it with my phone, I promise you I'll answer every time I feel it's appropriate. But if it's 8 o'clock on a Thursday night and I'm with my family, I don't think I need to answer the phone. So hopefully that gives a little bit of clarity. But yes, I was the only instructional technology specialist that didn't have a county issued phone for that reason. I said, look, I'll answer when you call if I want to, and chances are I'll want to. But again, I don't want to have to carry around two phones. But yeah, if your principal's calling you at home, I don't know. They shouldn't be. That's not to say they don't, but they shouldn't be. Okay, what else we got here? All right, this is what I would like for you guys to do then, okay? In a moment, I will wrap everything up, and when I do, I would like for each of you to go in under discussion, module 2, and scenario, module 2, and write completed in class, submit, okay? You will have full credit for that. I'm going to stop recording right now.